Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Welcome to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage, the Vault Series. Today's show is the entire interview I did, one of the first ones I did when I went to Los Angeles. I went to the Baked Potato Club, which belonged to Don Randi, keyboardist for the Wrecking Crew, and we talked about his life and his experience with all the great musicians in the session work that was happening in the 60s and 70s in L.A. Hope you like it. If you do, be sure to hit like, subscribe, notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. Once again, the great keyboardist Don Randi. So when did you know that you wanted to be a musician?
When I was a kid, up in the Catskills, I would accompany different acts. And I was studying classical music in those days, but I could earn a good living just by reading music. So I said, wow, I better stay with this. Because I knew I wasn't going to be digging ditches, that's for sure. That was not for me, and I loved music. I was around it forever.
Did you know that, was keyboard your first instrument?
Yes, it was. It was. My dad had a piano in the back of our restaurant, and I'd go and sit and play it, and then finally said, I guess I better get him some lessons, and it's been going on ever since.
So you took formal lessons?
I did.
And how long, in what age and how long did you do that?
I studied formally from 5 years old to about 20. And then realized that I heard some incredible pianists that were 10 years younger than I was. And I realized that I wasn't going to be a classical pianist because I enjoyed changing everything I played too much.
At that age, did you have any early musical influences?
Yes, I did. I remember the first jazz record I ever heard was Dave Brubeck, and then later on Oscar Peterson. So I preferred Oscar Peterson, and though I enjoyed Dave Brubeck very much. And then after that, in the early days, Nat King Cole, who was an incredible pianist besides being a great singer. And I loved his style of playing.
Well, what was your first public performance?
My first public performance was in a nightclub called Mary Ann Surf Club at 6th and Manhattan Place in Los Angeles. That was with my own little trio. It was the first time, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I knew I enjoyed playing. And we would get together, and other musicians would come in and sit in, and that was like a learning ground for me. And it was wonderful.
What was the name of it, and what kind of music did you play?
In those days, we were playing basically blues and jazz.
What was the name of your band?
Don Randi Trio.
And how did you make the transition from New York to Los Angeles?
Not easy, because I was a pretty free-spirited human being when I was a teenager. And when I came out to California to study, everybody was studying on the GI Bill, and those guys didn't want to fool around, and I came out to have a good time, and I couldn't. I had to really toe the line because those guys were doing it because they needed to learn a trade to make a living, and they all wanted to get into the studios to be studio musician, and you had to know what you were doing. For me, the lesson I learned to get into the studios is that you can be you 10 years after you start. But in the beginning, if they say, can you do a little Floyd Kramer? Can you make it a little funkier? Can you make it a little more country? Can you do it? And if you want to earn a living as a studio musician, you have to know those styles and listen to those styles. So today, when I go talk to other people, I'll go to a seminar in a music school, and I'll say, what stations do you listen to? And they all listen to one station. And I said, you can't make it. I said, the specialist days are over. You've got to be able to do anything if somebody asks you to do it, because that's what you're being paid for. And I love it, and then later on, all of a sudden someone will call me on the phone and say, gee, I just did a date and they asked me to copy a lick you did, wonderful. Mm-hmm. So, you grow into it.
What kind of a keyboard were you playing at that particular time?
But most of those days, most of them were Steinways. They were acoustic pianos. We didn't get into the Fender Rhodes till a little further down, and then we played that. I fought the electronics for years, and then I lost the battle, and I had to switch over, and now I have a slew of different electronic keyboards.
Did you play more like piano or more organ? Or
Well,
both?
once in a while I would do some organ, some Hammond B3 stuff, but generally it was on piano. We did the first Stone Ponies date that we did at Capitol some years later with Linda Ronstadt. We did Sound of a Different Drummer, the Mike Nesmith tune, and I do a harpsichord solo in that, and I got an album deal with Capitol because of that harpsichord solo. We got so many letters written to Capitol, and they said, well, let's go in and see if we can do an album with Don Randi.
How long before you made it from live performing into the studio, and how did that happen?
They went hand in hand. When I started playing around 1957, 58, around that time I went to the Sunset Strip in California, which was an important place to play, and there was a little jazz club called Sherry's right on the corner of Sunset and Crescent Heights, and it was people, everybody from all different walks of life would come in there, famous movie stars, record producers, and that's where, just before I started playing there, I met Phil Spector. And Phil actually said, why don't you come play on my rock and roll dates? I said, really? I said, okay. And that started. And in those days, that was the beginning of the Wrecking Crew. And if you played in that band, everybody wanted to use you. It was like the luckiest thing that could happen. And with Phil, you know, it was never me alone. It was like 3 or 4 piano players. We were the wall of sound.
And that would have been who?
That would have been sometimes Al DeLore, maybe, Mike Rubini, Larry Knechtel, later on Leon Russell. You know, they all filtered through there. It was all great, and every once in a while one of us would come up with a lick. But we were all that wall of sound, you know, that everybody playing different things in different positions on the piano. Phil knew what he was doing. He really did. And then there were Nick Vinay at Capitol was a great producer. We did a lot of stuff with him. Dick Glasser, another producer. And there were many different producers, independent. Dave Pell and Joe Saraceno, and everybody had a claim to fame at some period in that time. Tommy Catalano, the guy who produced Neil Diamond. Is interesting. We were doing Crackling Rosie, and Hal and I are in the rhythm section, and I said to Hal, I should arrange this song. I know exactly what to do. So Hal looks at me and shakes his head. He goes in the booth, and out comes Tommy Catalano. He says, you want to arrange this? Hal went inside and told him he should do it. That's how I got the job. And I did the arrangement on Crackling Rosie, which was, I believe, his first #1 record. Good old Neil Diamond.
And was that your first time to do an arrangement in the studio?
No, I had done some arranging before, but never. That was the first big time record. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Was it? Do you say Phil came in and saw you play, or was it,
Phil, well, I had met Phil before, and he liked to come out. He had just had a success with the Teddy Bears, and now he was becoming his own producer. He was going to start his own label. That's how he started Phyllis. And I even went to court with him when he got the money released, so that he could start a record company. Because I was 21 and he wasn't 21, so they needed an adult there also, and I was kind of like there to be a witness that this guy should be doing what he knows.
He was a baby.
Yeah, that's right.
And so you started with Phil Spector. And
Yes,
that was
yeah.
basically your first start in the studio.
That's right.
It's amazing. So you mentioned Brian Wilson. How did that come about?
Well, very easily. If you were working for Phil, because he was, they were very well respected, even way back then, because of, Lester Sill and Lee Hazelwood. They helped Phil get started. And if you worked for Phil, of course, you somehow were going to filter down to those guys, although Lester ended up hating Phil. They never got together. That was too bad, because they both were nice people. And I stayed friends with them, to this very day, although Lester is gone,
So, did Brian call you and say, hey?
Yeah. I got a call, and we went in, and we've been friends ever since. I didn't do everything Brian did, because I couldn't. I didn't do everything. I think I did most of the stuff Phil did, till the end. Then I got too busy, doing other things and writing. But my favorite, everybody has the Pet Sounds. They love that and all that. But I loved Help Me Rhonda. I mean, when we went in to do that, as he started singing it, I said, my God, this is a smash record. You just knew it. Whereas with Good Vibrations and those other things, you knew that they were going to be, but you weren't sure because Brian had something in his mind, and he did it piece by piece. He was like the sculptor putting together, and you were the rest of it,
Mm-hmm.
You were the clay.
What all artists did you play on for Spector?
For Spector,
Mm-hmm.
I did Darlene Love, who was most of the voices for different people, the Crystals, Bobby Sox and the Blue Jeans, the Ronettes, the Righteous Brothers, Ike and Tina. There was a number of other bands.
Did you do Be My Baby?
Yeah, sure did.
Did you Lost That Love and Feeling?
Yep. Absolutely.
Monsters.
They're monster songs, and I think Love and Feeling is probably one of the most played songs on the radio ever. We did a show last year with Nancy Sinatra, the Rolling Thunder show in Washington, and they had Paul Revere and the Raiders were there, and we used their band. Just Nancy and I went back, and by God, Bill Medley's son, and I forget the drummer, great musicians. They did a tribute to the Righteous Brothers, and there's Bill's son and this other guy sounding just like Bill Medley and Bobby Hatfield. And I was so taken by it because it was so good. It was excellent. And it's important because that was a great era and it should live on forever. And it will. It will,
One thing that I don't want to do, I don't want to sound like my parents did about our music, but I truly do think that was a period that I'm not sure will, because there were so many things happened at that time that just all, from changes in the society to electronics to even to intercontinental travel. The Beatles just came out of the sky. All of a sudden.
You got to remember, when I first started recording, there was one track. It was mono. That's why that album that collector said Phil Spector did called Back to Mono, because he remembers that too. I remember when they brought in the 4-track machine. Boy, what are they going to do with all those tracks? And then the 8-track, and then when they brought in 16. Oh, what do they need that for? And look where it is today, up to 48 in some studios.
Or more.
Or more.
Yeah.
And they found a space for it. But then everything switched now and it's all over again. It's all gone back to the computer where you don't need that. I remember, a few years back working for Ray Ruff, the late Ray Ruff. And it was the first time he was in the studio where they were using Pro Tools. And I'm sitting there, and he keeps looking this way over at the tape machine, and he keeps doing that and going back. I said, "What's the matter with you?" He says, "It's not running." And it was so funny. He could not get used to the idea that there wasn't tape going around, And it's true. The transition had to happen. I still like analog recording. I always will. But they're pretty damn close now. They're really quite accomplished with what they can do.
It's amazing, just the editing, and you can do things that are unbelievable.
Well, like you were just talking about the music, and I think the music is better than it's ever been. I love the music that we did. It was great. It was great for that time. But I think jazz, some of the jazz players are great. The new country songs that are written are just as great because you're not going to lose your soul. But, I listen to the music of a group called Green Day, and I think they're incredible. Another band called Incubus. This is the nucleus of a whole bunch of new stuff, and it's damn good, So, as a matter of fact, I would enjoy playing with one of those kind of bands. Not that I'll be asked to, but they're wonderful, And this is the new music of today. You'll watch, I watched Leanne Rimes from the very first day. And I said, my God, they haven't even tapped where she can go yet from that first record, and I was right,
Mm-hmm.
There are new things and new people that, in a sense, carry on a tradition. You know, it's just a different way to do it now.
How do you feel about being able to play off other players and doing a live session and having the drums and the keyboard?
I think it's the greatest thing there is. Nothing will ever replace that. You can go in a studio and it's not the same as when you have everybody there. I remember we were doing it was over at a studio called TTG. We were doing a Marty Robbins date years and years ago. And we were all sitting, everybody was baffled in their own little space. And there was about 7 of us in this one little room. And we did something that just happened to go in one take. And after that, there was silence. We all just sat there and looking at each other. And Marty got up and said, "It's not any better than this." And he was right, because we had just done something that was amazing. Not that we thought it was amazing, but we knew it was. You know, we didn't think of it at that time, but later on we looked back at it. I said, "My God, we did that in one take." You know.
And you can go back and you can just polish all the little imperfections out of it and sterilize it.
Yes, well, that's what happens to a lot of the remixes and all of that. No one breathes on a record anymore. You never hear a guitar squeak anymore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, somebody had to go like that to sing that next note. You know, why do you have to clean it up so much?
Yeah, I agree with that too.
You know, and the room ambiance that you got, just what was floating in the air, all those harmonics that were there. Important, so important.
A lot of the guitar players, the only thing they want now, it was, they didn't want the old tube amps, they wanted the transistor, you know.
Sure.
And now, well, not now, but for quite a few years, everybody has been, they were scrambling to get an old tube amp, and then of course the manufacturers started making them again for 2 or 3 times the price. You know. And so it's, everything old is new again.
Sure it is. Sure it is. I had a Steinway B in this club for years, and it ended up to be that I was the only one playing, and it was a great, great piano. And I had MIDI put into it so that I could play the Steinway and then be able to trigger synthesizers. And that was a big opening for me. And then eventually, I ended up being the only pianist playing at the club. Incidentally, the club is the Baked Potato, in case I didn't mention it. And nobody else was using the piano. Everybody had gone to electronic keyboards. And I fought it, and finally I brought in the Fender Rhodes and the synth. That's when I had the Steinway MIDI'd. And then finally, lifting it up and down all those times wasn't doing any good. And I finally just switched over to the closest sounding piano I thought was the Kurzweil. It was a PC-88, and then the Yamaha S90 has a really great feeling piano thing. So between the two of them, I do very well. And Roland has they had a thing called the MKS-20, and they stopped making it, It was great piano sounds. And they kind of tried to put it in other keyboards, I guess.
In your time so far in the studio, what has been the most consistently used instrument that you've played?
You mean keyboard-wise? Mm-hmm. Well, they leave it up to me, so it's my choice. They have my choice of the Kurzweil or the Yamaha, when I go in now. And every once in a while, someone will say, "Gee, would you like to use the Steinway?" I said, "Yeah, let's go." Mm-hmm. But so many times you don't see that. You'll see it on movie calls and television calls mostly. But most of the electronic bands are what they are. Not too much keyboard.
Studios that you've played in, are there any that stick out in your mind that are or were superior or more comfortable?
Well, we did hit after hit after hit at Gold Star. Gold Star was a magical place. It was small, and yet when you saw how Phil did it with sometimes 6 horns, 5 guitars, 4 piano players, 2 basses, 1 drum, 2 percussionists, and it was all in a room the size of this. That was it. That was what Gold Star A was.
Is it still in existence? Or
no, it's become another super mall, or a little mall actually. And it's a shame. Every time you drive by there, you know, the piece of your life is gone. Now, when they call me to say to do a session, they want to know, first of all, can I do it at home? And we used to make a joke about that. I'd love to phone this in. It's not a joke anymore.
Yeah.
You know, MP3, whatever, and bring it over here, throw this on.
Right.
So it's changed. The camaraderie is gone. I mean, the hang is gone. We all did a, what was it? Larry Knechtel and I were the pianists. Hal was the drummer. And a great, gigantic band with Shorty Rogers. And it was Mike Nesmith's gift back to the musicians, really, I think. And we recorded on Saturday and Sunday, double time for everybody, all union dates. It was catered by 2 or 3 different restaurants. It cost a fortune, but that's what he wanted. He wanted to do that. It was like, come on, guys, we're all going to hang.
Hal told me about that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did he tell you what Tommy did?
Tommy
Tedesco?
I can't remember.
Tommy Tedesco is my favorite guitar player of all time, and he will always be. Nobody will ever do what he could do. They can play a lot of things better than he could do, but no one could do everything like Tommy could do it. He was amazing. He was the ultimate studio musician. I mean, but also the ultimate player. He is just wonderful. And Mike Nesmith says, Tommy, you know, can you do something a little different when we get to this part here? You know, just some little more outrageous. And Shorty, Mr. Cool, yeah, Tommy, why don't you just, you know, take a shot at it, man, you know. Because that's how Shorty was, Mr. Cool. So Tommy's sitting there, and Larry and I are behind, and he said, oh, my God, what's going to happen now? And sure enough, we get to that part. We were at RCA Victor, which was like the big room, which was like a basketball court. And the next thing we know, here goes Tommy's Telecaster flying through the air, straight up on this long cord. It goes over the thing, comes down, bang, 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 all these sounds. And everybody's looking, we're hysterical. He said, well, you asked for something a little different, didn't you? Can you imagine?
I can't imagine.
It was wonderful.
Oh, boy.
And you know what? That damn Telecaster, he picked it up, tuned it, and it was fine.
A good plug for Fender. I guarantee you, a Gibson would have been, the headstock would have been gone, you know. Yeah.
But, you know, those days are gone. You know, we could do it. The Wrecking Crew was known for I remember Hal sitting at the drums on a Phil Spector date. And now we're getting to the point of we're in there 7 hours, and Phil wouldn't turn the tape on. He would just, you know, wait. He says, okay, let's start recording. Because the feeling was there, the sound was there. And now we're going, and the tape rolls, and all of a sudden, ring, ring, a telephone is ringing. And everybody's looking around, and Phil says, what the hell is going on? They stopped the tape, and Hal had gotten one of those stage telephones with the ringer on it. He picks it up. Hello? Hello? Phil, it's for you. And stopped the date cold, and we couldn't continue for a half hour after that. It was so freaking funny.
Hal, I tell you, he is a riot, man. He is just. You can't. I mean, he can't go 5 minutes.
He's so funny.
He is so funny.
But also, he was the guy that tuned his drums.
Mm-hmm.
He was easy to record, and all the other guys got that. Him and Earl Palmer took a minute. You know, everybody else played.
Had a really good time the other day. I went out to his house, and Earl was there, and
At Hal's house? Oh, how neat!
yeah, and Chad Smith,
Yeah,
and Jim
Keltner.
Keltner.
Oh, wow, you got lucky.
Yes, I did. And who else I can- and they were doing a round table for Martin Drummer, and Hal had invited me to come out just for that, you know.
Yeah.
Which was cool because I figured I'd hope that I could hang and maybe hook up
sure.
with you and
Yeah.
some other people and then he's out to NAMM on the weekend.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of folks out there. And that was a lot of fun. I got to tell you, I got 2 hours of really great
Well,
tape there.
a few years back, I did an album where I had an idea. We did it for Japan, and the idea was to be called "Sound of a Different Drummer." I have Hal Blaine, Jim Keltner, Vinnie Colaiuto, Carlos Vega, Tom Breckline, Walfredo Reyes, some of the greatest drummers in the world, and everybody played different. Everybody on that album, there are all these great players, and nobody played the same. But the interesting conversations were between the drummers. I did 2 a day. When one guy would be finishing, the other guy would be waiting around, and they usually hang out for a while. They all have such admiration and respect for one another that it's terrific. And people, it's hard to convey that because it's a very competitive business. But for those guys, it wasn't a cutthroat business, you know.
You could tell that from that there was, especially Hal and Earl,
Yeah.
That was a...
Well, you know who Jim Keltner started with, don't you?
I know that he worships Hal. No, I did not know that.
The first gig he had was with my trio at Sherry's when he was a kid. And Leon Russell would come in and sub for me because I'd be doing a session. I got Leon on the first dates he did in L.A.
Kid.
Yeah, oh yeah. And he and I have been friends ever since. But he came in and played with Keltner, and he calls me on the phone. He says, "This guy is amazing." And you know what was the most amazing thing about Keltner? You could set your watch to his time. It was just right on. He was so easy. You didn't have to go looking for anything. He just what a concept, time, you know. And he was such a sweet guy. And then Leon used him on a date, I guess. And that he called me, Keltner called me and said, they asked me to join the band. What do you think? I said, absolutely. I said, who's the band? He says, it's Gary Lewis and the Playboys. I said, okay. And he went. That was it. That was the first big gig for him.
Oh.
This Diamond Ring. You remember that?
Oh, God, yeah. Now, did he do the session on that?
I don't know if he did the session on that, but after that, I think he did. But he was destined for it because he's just so easy to play with and just a good-natured guy,
Well, I'll tell you. Let's see, Hal didn't see this, but when we were moving from the pool into the house, he and Chad were out there like 2 little kids talking about Earl
yeah.
and Hal and what should we have next? We got these 2 guys together. We need to, and they were when they were really, it was really like kids sitting on the floor looking up at their Santa Claus almost,
You know what's an amazing thing in retrospect, pardon me, for all of us, is that we didn't have time to screw around with anybody or to say, oh, that guy sucks or anything. There was everything every day. There was so much to do that you looked, the great thing for us is that you saw a different face from day to day. And it changed like that. But yeah, and at the same time, although it was different, it still was the same. It was that same clique that was doing it, mostly the Wrecking Crew, And those guys, because of that thing, we came through. That was not a bad thing, You start getting 20 million selling records in a row for Phil Spector, That's pretty damn good. And well, let's use that band because they make hit records. And later on, what's the name of the guy? Paul Schaefer. He's out here one day with Phil. We were doing some date. We never knew who the artist was. And we're trying to redo the Wrecking Crew again. We're all walking around. And every time I turn around, Paul Schaefer's there. What the hell is going on? Finally, I said, Paul, what's going on? He says, you don't realize. He says, I love this so much. I said, you got to be kidding. He says, no. He says, when you guys were making all those hit records, one after another, with multitude of different artists, we were trying to emulate you in New York. We would listen to those records and then we go in and try and do them, and we never did it. And I said, that's amazing. He says, no, it's not amazing. It was the truth. He says, you guys were doing it and we were coming close. That's what it was. So we never thought about it. We didn't have time to think about it. I remember for 2 years, although I paid for it later, my wife said, you realize, I think you were home twice in 1 week this week, We'd go out, we'd come back, we'd go, 1 week I did 26 dates, which is impossible. And I wrote 4 of them. And I got home the following week, and I had about a day off and started again. And there was that much work live recording. And what everybody forgets, and I talk even the musicians and the wrecking crew and all that, we had a special thing then. It was called cover records. They don't cover records anymore. If somebody would come out with a record of some hit, and they'd hear it like it's coming out, bingo, you'd be in. And sometimes you'd do the same song in a period of 2 weeks, 3 times. And they challenged each other for the #1 record. The promotion guys would go out. You had a fight to get a #1 record because Dean Martin had a version of this, and somebody else had a version of it, and let's go after it. Those days are gone. No more of those challenges. Okay, we'll leave that alone. Let's go for a different thing. So it was an interesting part of the business that vanished, and it was a fun part. It was an interesting part because the arrangements would almost be the same. You know, they didn't want to vary it too much, but it was a different upfront artist. You know.
Would that cause problems between the musicians and the original producer if they got booked?
No, you know who some producers might be offended, but you got to remember we're studio musicians. We're not under contract. We're not contract players. We're contract players for that date only. If somebody else hires you for another date 2 days later, and that song is there, you have no control over that. You got to do your job, and that's what it was, you know. And there would be a lot of those, you know, not thousands of them, but it was a good fun part of the thing, you know.
I guess, you know, the Beach Boys were still one of my all-time favorite groups, I guess. And I guess Brian had to be one of the most incredible people to work with.
Brian had, I guess, for want of a better analogy, elephant ears.
Yeah.
You know, he's just amazing. But a lot of times, you were kind of in the dark because you were doing a section of something, and you know, he was piecing it together. He knew where it was going, but you didn't know. There's a low note. I've told this story a million times. We had been going over and over and over. I think I know Hal was there. I think Glen Campbell might have even been one of the guitar players on Good Vibrations. And there's a whole organ pad, the low end of the organ, and it was just one note. That was like the bottom part of it, and I'd have a couple of, but it didn't matter. It was a low note that he was looking for, and he was hearing something harmonically. We kept doing it over, and it's, you know, it can become boring as hell and tiring. And finally, I got real tired, and I mean, it was like 7 or 8 hours of trying to get this thing right. I took a pillow, a little pillow that was there, and I laid down on the low thing of the Fender, of the Hammond B3, on the bass pedal, and I laid down, and it kept going over and over, and they keep coming back and back. He never missed me sitting on there. And they kept recording over it. The guys kept wondering what the hell, but it's what he's looking for, you know. And finally, after about a half hour, I woke up and got back up. It's a true story. As I'm sitting there, I had to do that. I mean, I was so tired, but that's how it occurred.
And I heard that a lot of times, and not just with Brian, but some of the guys that I was with in New York were telling me that their songs were like, okay, we're going to do number 27 now, or we're going to do this. They didn't even have titles. They just came in and did, we need a lead riff in this section right here. They wouldn't even know what it was. And then they hear it on the radio and go, oh, wait, that's me. Yeah. Oh, so that's what it was, you know.
Well, how many times you did a song and then they changed the title?
Yeah.
You know, so it was like a working title, and then you didn't really know. But generally speaking, I say for us, we always had titles because we had to put it down on the union contracts.
Yeah.
And that was a blessing. We didn't know it in those days. But Phil insisted upon a union contract. Brian Wilson insisted upon a union contract. And because they were like in the front of setting the pace for everybody. Everybody else did. Columbia, they forced everybody to be legit.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, all those dates that we did, when they redo it today, we get paid. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten anything. And when I go and I talk to the kids, I said, you got to have some record, because this will creep up and bite you right in the rear end one day. You're going to say, gee, that's me. Why didn't I get paid for that? You know, it's a two-edged sword. The union, you know, can screw up a lot of things, but for us, it was a godsend, because it's nice to go to your post box and say, "Ooh, look at this!" You know, I don't care if it's $10 or $300, whatever it is. It's something that you earned, that you put your heart and soul into many years back, and the payback is great.
How many of those albums of the Beach Boys do you remember playing on? I know that's a hard question because you played so many records.
I think 3, 4, you know, complete albums. It may be many more of that, because a lot of times you did just a few tunes on each album. You know.
Were you on California Girls?
Yeah.
Was that you doing the two? Or on
yeah,
organ?
yeah, that's right. I think that's me on that one. Definitely on Help Me Rhonda. There's one that, yes, that was California. The one that
God Only Knows?
Yes, that one. A lot of the Pet Sound stuff, you know, basically. I went to see Brian in Hawthorne, where he grew up. They gave him an honor last year, and they put up a...
Saw that.
Did you see that? I was there. I went to that. It was one of the best times I had during the day. You know, I mean, we had a wonderful time, and we all got together afterwards. They did a big get-together. And Brian was so gracious. His wife is terrific. I mean, she really keeps him going. You know, she get up, because if she didn't, he wouldn't do anything. You know, I'm sold on that. So strong. I feel so. A lot of people feel, oh well, maybe she's pushing too much, but no, I think she's absolutely right. He's got some beautiful daughters. You know, and it's great. It's great to see him active.
Yeah, I've seen him quite a bit on TV lately.
And the band that plays with him, what the hell are they called? They're wonderful.
There's enough of them, but it takes that.
They're as good as what the original was. As far as, I can't remember. The Wondermints. They're excellent.
There's a difference between covering and creating.
Oh yes, sure.
So, but yeah, I agree with you. I think it's great.
Listen, how many sessions did we do that started out, whereas the producer had an idea, the arranger had an idea, and the artist had an idea, and they didn't have the same idea. So that when we got there, everything changed.
Right.
And then it became a hit record.
Right.
And half the time, a drum lick that was leading into something, or a drum fill that done over and over, becomes like the hook of the record.
Lick.
You know, or a piano lead that you played, or somebody does something on a guitar. And that was the magic of the live recording stuff, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I know the Funk Brothers, I've interviewed and got with and everything. The same thing. They actually ended up really producing and definitely arranging.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
Sure, sure.
And those guys, they were telling me they'd go out and play the night before. When they get through with the session, they'd go jam somewhere, and then they'd come in and go, "Hey, you know what we did the other night? Do that on this song," you know. And so everybody benefited from those guys being together and gelling like you guys.
Yeah. Well, for me personally, I never stopped playing in a nightclub, even when we were doing all those recordings. All the other guys didn't do that. They might help me out one night if I got stuck, and they'd sub for me. But I would still work as much as I could playing live. I always felt that I could derive something from that I didn't get in the sessions, and it was true. The sessions, you were basically what you did. But improvising and playing openly, you know, in a club is completely different, and that's where my basic jazz influence comes in. And it just helped me, you know, be able to be a little more creative as a studio musician also.
Yeah.
And to go from an artist like Duane Eddy to Frank Sinatra, or from Sonny and Cher to Dean Martin, and span that, and then get all those hits with Lee Hazelwood, with Nancy Sinatra and other people too, and then work for Glenn, and Neil Diamond, the Monkees, whatever, whoever called you in, the list goes on and on and on, and then later on, I get hired to do some guy backed by Playboy decides he's going to do a country show, and they get Johnny Rodriguez to MC it, and they get everybody to do the show. I mean, and I was the musical director with a great big country orchestra, and we had the greatest time, and the show never got sold, and it's too bad because I think it was another side of Johnny Rodriguez that nobody ever saw, that he could, I don't know how they got him to pull it off, it wasn't easy, but that he became a master of ceremonies in this thing. And that was the first and last time you ever saw him do that. But I remember doing the session with Eddie Rabbitt, when he came out for that, and he was delightful. And all of a sudden he's telling me he's from New York. And I'm looking, I say, no, you can't be from. He says, yes, I am. Which I thought was amazing. So for me, being able to go in and play a country date, to go in and play a funky session, for H.B. Barnum, who I absolutely loved. You got to remember, I did all those Lou Rawls dates too, and I conducted for Lou for a couple of years. And sad, he just passed away, and those were fun. H.B. Barnum was one of the more amazing arrangers and people to work for. He had a definite way he could write, and he's the only guy out of all the guys I know, and all the arrangers, musicians, that if you gave him an instrument for a couple of days and locked him in a room, he'd come out playing it. He was that good. He was just, his ears are just amazing, and his love of music, he's just so talented. Him, and arranger-wise, Jack Nitzsche was another one. Jack kept coming up with all those hits, and one after another for Phil and for other people.
Neil, that's all he was talking about just about was Jack. Neil Young.
Neil Young. Well, that because of Jack, I got to play on those records. There's a Broken Arrow. It's one of the songs in it. There's a great piano solo on there that goes on and on forever. And I kept saying, when are they going to tell me to stop? And it gave me a good shot. That was a big help to me. I took Neil Young and Jack Nitzsche fishing one day. We were out on our boat. I had a boat for years, and we're in Malibu. And we're about maybe a mile off the beach. And they're looking, they're pinning all the chicks on the beach. That's all they're doing. And Neil's got the lines in. We're not getting a bite. All of a sudden, Neil's line gets hit. And, it just goes screaming, and I said, oh my God, what could that be? And now he's, Neil is always milk white anyway. He was really milk white. And he grabs the line, and I said, this is light test, and it's something bigger than I said, go very slowly. So the thing nearly runs out of the, it's in the ocean, it's ocean reel, and it stops. I said, start doing it, and he starts doing it, and it's going real fast, but we didn't realize the damn fish was coming back. Finally, it goes out again, and now we're going into 45 minutes, and he's determined we're going to get this thing. Now I'm thinking, if it's a giant fish or something, I don't have a gaff pole. I can't get it on board. Finally, the boat was like 25 feet. A blue-gray shark is what he has. This is a mile off the coast. It's almost half the size of the boat. And Neil's looking, what do we do? What do we do? I said, we're not going to do too much, Neil. And I'm looking for something, he wants it, Oh. And finally, the damn thing just raised up out of the water, and they were like in eye contact, and it snapped the line and said, see ya, and took off. And Neil, he was so dejected. But it's a true story, great story. Jack is sitting there, he was hysterical. We just couldn't stop laughing. Neil became the fisherman all of a sudden. Well, I liked the rock and roll. I really did. I liked the acid rock that nobody could stand. I didn't mind the screaming guitars because,
What's an acid rock that you played on?
well, that's a good question. I can't remember now, but I know
Oh,
there was a guitar player who worked with us, Mike Deasy. He doesn't get mentioned enough, but he was one of the first guys of the studio genre that kind of became a specialist in what he did. If they wanted that, screaming guitar, and now everybody can do it, but he was the guy they'd call. Who we were doing? We were doing Bruce and Terry. Do you remember that? Bruce Johnston, Terry Melcher,
yeah.
and
Unfortunately,
yeah. Well, when we were doing that date, unfortunately, the guy showed up. Charlie Manson was there. He wanted to get his songs played. That's why he was there. And Mike Deasy was one of the guitar players. Glen Campbell, I think Joe Osborne, myself, and Hal. We were doing this date over at Columbia, because they were a Columbia artist, I believe. And they were producing it themselves and writing the songs. And Charlie wanted to get the songs played. And Mike Deasy would go out to the ranch with those guys. Scary, very scary. Thank God any one of us could have gone there, at any given time, but we didn't, we made a choice.
Dennis Wilson did.
I guess, yeah.
That's it. And the rumor is that he was going after Terry Melcher, wasn't he?
That's true. That was, Jay Sebring was one of my big fans. When we first started out as a little jazz trio, he was the first barber. It was a men's barber, but he made it fashionable to take a hair dryer and blow a guy's hair with a blow dryer. Oh, before that, what is that? Chick stuff. And after that, all the other guys started doing it, and he no longer was a barber. He became a hairstylist.
Yeah.
And then he came out with his, and he was the nicest, sweetest guy. And whenever he came into Sherry's, there was always one or two of the most beautiful women. Oh my goodness. Always two real classic, good-looking ladies. And that was Jay, that was his style. And the house that he went to, we used to be owned by Terry Melcher. So it could have been very, very easily that he was looking for Terry. But that was a scary time. 69 or 70, I believe. Because the club just opened at that point.
One thing I always ask the greats is, what would they want to tell people coming up that want to do what they've done or what you've done?
Well, the first thing I could say is, don't ever be afraid to make a mistake. Go for it. And if you make a mistake, remember what you did, so that you don't have to do that again. But if you never try something, because a lot of times that mistake all of a sudden becomes what's really important, and then you go on. And if you're doing improvising, anything like that, it's never the first chorus. It's always the second, third, fourth, and fifth. It's never, you have to develop, you have to grow on what you're doing. And I'm never satisfied with anything I do. I can be happy with it and enjoy it, but every time I listen to something on my own albums, I'm like, gee, I could have done this, gee, I could have done that. And that's important. I mean, because if you believe that everything you've done is really the tops and it can't be any better than that, you ain't going to do it. It's over. You can like what you've done, but you got to go on. You have to keep chasing, and don't give up. Every time I think I really know or understand, for me it was a tough thing to switch to synthesizers. And when I'll go do a seminar, I get lessons from the young kids. They'll come over and say, if you do this, or if you program this way, this is what, and I welcome it, because I'm a player, I'm not a programmer. So if somebody can show me something, I'm right there.